And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
I've been better. As you know, as we were getting on here, my personal MacBook wouldn't turn on. Just wouldn't turn on. Like it was, no low battery sign, no none of that. The caps lock didn't work. It just didn't turn on. It was just blank. And so I'm fortunate enough to have a work laptop that I'm using right now. Because I guess we got to improvise. So not the worst thing, but definitely not doing as well as you are. Or as well as the Bruins are, who are a nice little segue there. They are doing terrific of late, 9-1-1 in their last 11 games. The only loss coming to Anaheim, the Anaheim Ducks, who we will get to later in the show when we preview the trade deadline, because it is 1 week from the deadline for us as we record, but when you hear this, it'll be less than a week, which is crazy when it gets down to like the deadline. It's like kind of like getting down to crunch time. Like we've been talking about this for months, and now it's kind of finally here. Finally, and we'll get to it in a little bit. But it doesn't feel like we're hearing a lot about it. Maybe it's because it's a few days it's still a few days from now. But am I wrong to say we're not hearing a lot of chatter?
No, you're not getting all. Like, there's a potential chance for this deadline to be a dud, just because it seems like either teams are going in the completely wrong direction in terms of like trying to re-sign guys when they should be accelerating a rebuild. Like the San Jose Sharks are apparently going hot after getting Tomas Hertl signed, which makes no fucking sense. It makes no sense at all.
None.
But and that's not just from the perspective of the Bruins sure could use them, but in terms of their long-term goal. It's same with like Nashville, who's like supposed to be looking at maybe entertaining an offer for Forsberg before he signs a big deal this summer. And yet they sign, Ekholm to an extension last year, and they could have accelerated this rebuild. It just seems to don't know what they're doing, or whether it's the fact that you've seen some teams that have rebuilt on the fly very quickly. These teams are so terrified of moving, useful assets in case 2-3 years down the line, they're all of a sudden rebuilding with a new core and they've moved that guy 2 years ago when, again, you're probably getting good value for them if you trade them. So it's a situation where it's either teams are still reluctant to kind of pull the trigger on moves, or there's a lot of buyers out there, not a lot of sellers, or it's, again, that fact that teams are so afraid of being, caught 2-3 years down the road without a vital piece in their lineup, when at the end of the day, the good move should still be to move those assets and get some value back, whether it's draft capital, younger players, prospects, what have you.
I don't know why that's so difficult. It's such a, hey, this guy's leaving at the end of the season. But I think part of the reason why you're not hearing a lot and you're hearing these kind of wishy-washy things is guys like JT Miller, who was rumored for months, still has a year left on his deal. They don't have to move him. Same with Chychrun. He has many years left on his deal. You don't have to move him. So I think that's kind of the holdup a bit. Again, we'll get to the full deadline stuff later in the show. Nice little primer for what we get to later. Kind of keep you interested, as they say. But if there's anything good going on in the land of the Bruins right now, the top thing is Charlie Coyle in this third line. This is coming together, and it's been a while. This has not been like a week or 2 weeks. This has been a while for them that Coyle, Smith, Frederick is working. And it's funny because we said this, I said this a lot during last offseason, in the sense that you need depth to win, to go deep. Now, granted, have they gone deep yet with this group? Nope, they haven't. Right? Like, it's just regular season success. And that's, but that's all you can get right now. That's all you can get. And right now, the depth of Eric Halla is holding together on line 2. The fourth line has been working. The third line now is producing. You have balance and depth that you didn't really have in past seasons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that third line's been crucial. I mean, you look at so far in March, I think it's been 6 total games. And I want to say that the Marchand, Bergeron, DeBrusk lines combined for, I think, 2 goals over those 6 games. And the Bruins are full 1-1. Now, this was earlier in the year where you didn't really know who the 2C was, or, the third line and fourth lines were sort of out of whack. And you knew going into it that your top line was only getting you 2 goals over a 6-game span. What are you looking at? Like,
you're selling at the deadline.
Yeah, 1-4-1 is what you think the record would be, not 4-1-1, right? So, it's huge for the Bruins in terms of just putting that line together. And again, that's not a line that was a situation where, go back to January and they had Pasta got shifted down to the second line. You're like, all right, this is new, but like this makes plenty of sense. Like, of course, there's probably people who are clamoring for that top line to be broken up for a while now. You look at this third line, when they got, assembled, it wasn't a sure given thing that they were going to produce. There's a lot of question marks, right? Because in years past, you didn't know how Coyle and Smith were going to gel together because on that second line, it didn't seem like it really worked out. And then Trent Frederick, we've talked about it before. You didn't know, is this guy just going to be kind of, pigeonholed as just a fourth line checking player? Like, what's his offensive ceiling? How does he kind of mesh with those kind of players? And it's worked out great. I mean, it certainly helped that Craig Smith, who's been mostly cold for most of this year, is on a heater. So you're getting
red hot.
Yeah, exactly. So it's helped out a lot that a lot of these encouraging shifts, a lot of these extended ozone possessions are usually ending with Smith firing one into the net, which helps out their overall production. But I think you look at the fact that I think Coyle seems a lot more engaged. He looks healthy. And it's one of those things too, where Coyle may not have worked out at, second line center opening the year, but I don't think that was also a byproduct of him. Like, I think it was also sometimes it's just not meshing with the other players and their play style, because he was still a productive guy. I think you looked at where he was in November, December. I think he was on pace for like 45, 50 points, which maybe is what you're looking for a 2C, but still pretty effective, and a guy who looks night and day compared to what he was last year. So hopefully that knee surgery helped him quite a bit. But whether it's Coyle and Smith playing well, which you desperately need, or Frederick, who, again, we've talked about this before, but you look at Frederick's value on this NHL roster, and he doesn't need to be this guy who's going to become a 20 goal scorer. The Bruins would love if that happened. But if if he's a guy who gives you 25, 30 points over an 82 game span, plays physical hockey, doesn't end up in the penalty box that much, and add just that level of physicality and just the smart, sound plays. Like, he's not this guy who, during these ozone possessions is, dangling through guys, or he's doing a pirouette on the ice. But if he's winning, he's winning board battles, he's recovering pucks, doing those little things that contribute to, extended ozone shifts, it's leading to positive results. So it's funny that you look at where some of the other areas of this Bruins roster they have to address, whether it's the top line if DeBrusque gets moved 2C, if you still think you need an upgrade there. Obviously the defense, one thing you don't have to worry about is the third line right now. Like, that's a line I would not touch at all between now and March 21st or beyond that.
Yeah, no, don't touch it at all, actually. Just leave it. And it's funny because, again, you kind of mentioned this, but Smith and Coyle didn't really work at all when they were paired together to begin last season. And then Smith went up next to Krejci and started to produce, but it was kind of like, man, they kind of got Smith for Coyle and didn't work out. And that kind of felt like a lost cause. Now it's completely shifted. Now it is working. It's kind of all coming to fruition in that sense. But again, I think part of the reason Coyle works so well in that third line is, again, you mentioned it. He's great, possessing the puck and in the ozone, and he's a hard worker and gets back and all these things. But it's also the mismatches, like going up against other. He's not built like a third line center. He's not. He's probably better than a third line center. It's kind of always been the ceiling with him. Is like being on in the top six. But when you get to go against teams' third lines or their fourth lines or whomever, and you're not facing their best, Coyle kind of thrives. And I think you're seeing that night in and night out with this third line. So good signs there. Again, the depth is coming through at the right time. And, it's hard to look ahead. And we can look ahead right now with Toronto and Tampa, who are two teams who are struggling. Toronto has just been brutal for a bit now. Tampa's on, I think, like a 4 or 5 game losing skid. They just lost in Edmonton the other night. Not great. Toronto, I think, is in a worse spiral because Toronto's Toronto. Tampa's won 2 straight cups. I think they're fine, but Toronto is looking brutal right now.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not good when you go like, what is it? Like an 8.8 save percentage since 887, I think, since start of February. Who could have seen this coming, right? And it's just like the way that team is built. It's such like a broken roster that I don't know how they address it, right? Like, you've got it has to be, maybe not frustrating is right. Well, I'm sure for a fan it's frustrating, but you look at how they've, built this roster in this offseason where like they had so many home run signings for cheap. Like, Kasha looks great. Bunting, which we talked about before, Bruins should have signed because he was really cheap and he was really good in a limited sample size in Arizona, and he could win the Calder. We know he's like 38 years old, but
he's on
but
AARP.
still, yeah, exactly. Still, like home run signings across the board, and it's all going to be undone because they don't have a goalie. And so now, like, what spot do you win? Because like it looks like Campbell's out of gas. Peter Mrazek is Peter Mrazek, which like even if he rebounded, let's say like you roll with Mrazek and he finishes the year on a high note and they get to the playoffs. If you're a Maple Leafs fan, do you feel confident in Peter Mrazek, especially if you're facing the Bruins? Which
No, not
I don't
particularly.
think Peter Mrazek has a fun time going up against the Bruins. So
no.
So now you're in this spot where like you're circling the wagons and like trying to figure out what to do. So it's like now you're seeing, does Toronto need to get Marc-Andre Fleury? Which now it's like you're hoping to, instead of adding other pieces to your roster to help you, push you across the board, you now have to invest in a goalie who may not even want to be here. Like if Chicago's moving Fleury, it's going to be up to him. And if I'm Fleury, do I want to go to Toronto?
Oh, not now. No, you don't.
So it's that is
Fleury's always a lovable guy. I feel like that would be the one place where they would just still find a way to hate him. Because he would just be off. You never know. The defensive front is so bad.
Right. Yeah. So it is. If you're the Bruins, you have to be smelling, I think, blood in the water in terms of moving up in the Atlantic, which even 5-6 weeks ago didn't seem like it was going to be the case. But now, whether it's Toronto, which that is a deeply flawed roster, or Tampa, who I think is just more or less in a rut, I'm not worried about Tampa Bay at all. Again, we'll see what happens when we get to the playoffs, because it is going to be like a full 82 game schedule for them. Vasilevsky, fantastic goalie, but how that workload plays out, it'll be interesting to see how that happens. But if there's a team that's going to rebound, it's probably going to be a team that's won 2 cups and has a lot of winning players on that team. Toronto, not good. That's not great. Very scary.
No, very scary for them. But I do look at kind of the Bruins' depth, and you say this is something they have not had in past years, where even last year and even in 1920 when they won the President's Trophy, if memory serves, their third line was not that great. The fourth line was there. Again, you didn't get a lot of production outside of that top line. And it feels like this year it's completely different, where you're getting depth scoring. And who knows? Maybe that's what gets you competitive with Tampa. Maybe that's what gets you past these teams. And that's why you kind of got to invest, because you don't know. But yeah, Toronto is catchable. Toronto's 2 points behind. You're 2 points behind Toronto. They're falling fast. And it's funny. It's like Jack Campbell used the All-Star game as like his Stanley Cup. He got to the All-Star game. I was like, all right, season's over. I'm good.
Yep.
I don't need to do this anymore. And then Tampa, you're 5 points behind. I don't think you're catching them. To me, I still think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, maybe I'd still want to play Florida in the first round over Tampa. And maybe that's just like some PTSD kicking in of like the past couple seasons, because Florida is like absurd, and they're only going to get better at the deadline. But I still look at that Florida team and I go, that's kind of beatable. Again, they're nasty, but for 7 games, you never know with Bobrovsky. And again, the Lightning are just too good. So hard to tell. Not a safe bet with either of those teams. It's funny. I had to work late, very late Sunday into Monday morning, because the brackets were released and it was a big thing over at NCAA.com. And I probably had to write up and do a bunch of so many different bracket predictions from different bracket experts. I feel like I'm a bracket expert at this point, and I am not someone you should be taking college basketball advice from. Not particularly, even though I do think Arizona is going to win. I think Arizona is going to be the team to win. So that's do you have a pick? Have you even had a chance to look at the bracket?
I have to do a little bit of a deeper dive, Evan, but I like Arizona. It's always a good one. The problem is every single year I commit to Kansas. Every year they let me down.
Tough. Yeah.
But the one year it's going to be the internet meme where it's the guy who's he's popping the champagne and he's flipping off the crowd and he's got the bronze medal. That's going to be me. 1 year I'm going to be flipping off everyone after being wrong 19 years in a row, and Kansas finally wins again. But we'll see. I'll do a little bit of a deeper dive. I'll get back to you.
Get back to me on that. But what we're really focused on, you and I and all of the listeners, is the deadline. As I mentioned, we were going to get to the trade deadline. It's finally here. And it's funny how things have changed, right? Because we've been talking about the deadline for months now, because when the Bruins were struggling, we were kind of sitting here going, should they really invest? Do you really want to invest in this crew? Remember those games where they're losing 7-0 to Carolina, and the 3-1 loss to the Islanders in New York? It just looked terrible. And And then it became, all right, they need a second line center. They definitely need a second line center. And then they switched up the top line, and then they moved Pastrnak down. They moved Hala up. And you said, okay, well, you can get by with that. And what's funny is the defensive metrics are actually really good.
Yeah.
Like as a sum of the parts, it's working. But it just kind of comes down to when you isolate everyone and you go, you really want your left side to be Grzelcyk, Forbert, and Riley, or any combination of those three. So if going into the deadline, we're a week away now, it's pretty official. What do you look at as their number one need? What has to be done on Monday?
I mean, I still think if you're looking from the lens of, both improving this team and bolstering them for the years ahead, which I think is still their priority, is, not a short-term rental. I still think you have to strengthen your team down the middle. I still think Erik Haula, as good as he is, I think there needs to be some skepticism as to where he best fits on that team. If he's a capable 2C for the future and going into the playoffs. So whether it's, and again, the guy we've talked about, who I keep on talking about, is Hertl, but it's going to depend on whether he's even available. But if he is, that's the guy you go out and get, because he's not only the guy that helps you out this year, and it's a good problem to have. You have to decide between Erik Haula or Tomas Hertl. Where do we put Erik Haula? Because we have to bring in Tomas Hertl. It's a good problem to have. And again, if this team hopes to, bridge that gap and continue to contend in the years ahead, and whether it's the post-Bergeron era or during these next years where Bergeron's maybe still there, but he's still not getting any younger, you desperately need a guy like that. So it's not just the fact that this deadline's important for the Bruins in terms of putting them over the top, which there's multiple guys that they're interested in. Well, it remains to be seen if they're going to be moved, but I think the biggest thing is this gives you a window to continue to set the foundations for what you want this team to be the next couple of years, if you're able to get one of these guys. Now, granted, we could be looking at this in, Monday morning, and we'll find out that Hertl has signed a 7-year deal because he wants to stay and do middling things out in the Bay Area. Or
Bay Area is a nice place. Yeah,
worst places to be, I guess. With that Erik Karlsson contract and all that stuff.
Brent Burns.
Or JT Miller's not getting moved, which wouldn't surprise me. Chychrun probably not getting moved, and he's also very well could be hurt. Andrew Kopp I think he got concussed during his most recent game against the Blues. Shocking.
Good.
St. Louis Blues. So he's a guy who could be out of commission. So it could be a situation where the Bruins are sitting there like, all right, there's only like 2 or 3 prime targets, and at that point you've got so many teams trying to buy in that, all right, is the best option at that point Claude Giroux, who you have to give up like a first and a blue chip prospect just because so many teams are bidding for his services. And again, I think we've talked about it before, like Giroux doesn't exactly fit that long-term goal. Again, I don't think you're going to see Bruins fans bemoaning the fact that Claude Giroux's on their team. Like, fantastic player, and he could kind of fit that solution where he could be your 2C if you need him, or he can be that play on right wing on that top line. You've got a mega line. So like
that'd be nuts.
In the lens of just, the vacuum of just this year, Giroux would be great. It's just how much do you want to invest in that guy for 2-3 years down the road? Like Hertl, if you pick between him and Hertl, for example, it's pretty clear. But it's going to just come down to, I think, what the market is and what teams are actually committed to selling and what those prices are going to be. Because I think the Bruins are interested in upgrading in a ton of areas. Like I said, 2C, but I still think they could use another defenseman somewhere. I don't know if a guy like Lindholm is the best option because I think he's going to be pricey, and I think he's set on going to market, even though he is a top 4 guy. But whether it's like Josh Manson, or if you want to even do like a cheap value add like Justin Braun, isn't flashy. He's not going to steal the headlines in the back of the paper, but it's a guy that helps you out in that regard. So
a lot of headlines in the back of the paper.
Oh yeah, I messed it up. Whatever. I don't work for the newspaper anymore. I don't work for the newspaper. It's a digital publication, Evan. Yes. But you look at just the multiple ways that avenues that they can improve this team. Plenty of different routes they can take to improve here or there. I think it's going to come down to what the market is, and right now it just seems like teams are biding their time or are hesitant just to go all in with committing to selling those assets.
Yeah, I mean, again, and we've said this a lot, like Giroux fits perfectly short-term. Like, I don't think you can find a better short-term fit for just, you can plug and place him anywhere in the top 6, and I think you're cooking. But again, Hertl just works long term. Like if you can get him to re-sign as well, which I think that'd probably kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of thing. Oh, I mean, again, like what a fit. But again, I look back to Chychrun and I say, man, that'd be a fit. Now I know, granted, the Bruins might have screwed themselves here and actually just injured him.
Yes.
Even though the word is that he should be fine.
Yeah.
But just kind of shaken up, played like a little over 5 minutes against the Bruins the other night on Saturday, which was Irish Heritage night, the green warm-ups and everything. I was not there, but it looked like a great atmosphere for a Saturday night game against the Coyotes. But I just look at him and you look at long-term. I mean, he's your number one left shot defenseman long-term on a good contract. All signs point to the fact that he is stable back there. Even, I mean, granted, his numbers are not great, or his advanced stats aren't amazing because he's on just kind of a terrible Coyotes team. He's really the number one guy on the back end. He plays every situation. But I think if you just put him in a good system here with a guy like McAvoy or even with Carlo, like I think that works perfectly. And again, I said this, I think he was either on Bruins Beat last week or Poke the Bear, the two blend at this point. But I look at it, you know, if you have to give up Lowry for that, I don't hate that. Like, again, I think the world of Lowry, and I've thought this for a long time, but you're basically trading a future Chychrun for a current Chychrun, and you need to win now, in a sense. And Chychrun's young. Was he 23?
He's 23.
23. He's my age. I said this last week. But my point is, again, it makes sense. So if you can find a way to get Chychrun, and if the package is centered around Lowry, I have a hard time not doing that.
I think my concern with Chychrun is he's a great player. I don't think it's going to be Lowry in the first. I guarantee you Arizona wants Lowry, Lysell a first, and probably DeBrusk and maybe something else. They want that much.
That's
like
nuts.
Apparently what I think it was Greg Wyshynski said, they want multiple firsts, like 2 or 3 top prospects, and like an NHL player. This is the same team. This is the same team that would not give in on salary retention to the Bruins for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Like Bill Armstrong is not going to budge for a guy that's got that many years on his contract that they don't need to move right now. He's only going to move him if he gets a legit piece. And again, this is why when we talked about Chychrun before, and we revisited when we said that when the reports were out there that the Bruins are still interested in him, but I initially took Chychrun off the Bruins, sweepstakes list a while back because Rask retired and Swayman became the number one, because I thought the only thing Arizona would budge for would be Swayman. And it's not going to be the case anymore. But if he's off the books, which he would be, I think they're going to ask for Lowry and Lysell for a guy like that. And again, they have no leverage to fold if the Bruins are holding off against that.
Yeah, and the other thing is they don't. Again, as I said, they don't have to move him.
Yeah,
like they can do this every year for like 3 or 4 more years if they wanted to, and just keep like dangling them out there because they're not contending anytime soon. So again, that's another element of like that's just they don't have to budge off their asking price. If someone really needs a Chychrun, they'll pay for him, and if they hit that price, then so be it. A team I do look at though is the Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks are an interesting case because they have a lot of what you might need. Ricard Raquel would plug right into your top 6. He's played center in the past. I mean, you could maybe get by with him being a center. I believe he's on the wing right now with Anaheim.
He's mostly a winger.
Mostly a winger, but again, maybe you can put him at center, but he can find a spot in the top 6 for him most likely. And on D, either Lindholm or a guy like Manson, who kind of solidifies you as a third pairing defenseman. That could be again like you deal for 2 of them, right? Do you see that being a potential thing that they do? Because the Bruins have in the past like trading with the Ducks. Yeah,
there's history there, and again, you said within just the lens of just this season, it makes plenty of sense. Like Raquel is a previous 30 goal scorer. He's had injuries in the past, which you have to be a little bit concerned about. But in terms of that if you're committed to moving to DeBrusk, for example, and you're trying to find a good bet to place in that top line, a guy like Raquel, who's a shifty player, good shot. Again, most guys do pretty well with Marchand and Bergeron. So Raquel, you would imagine, would fit in pretty well there. And if not, and you have to move him around, he's still a valuable piece somewhere. You'll find a spot for a guy like Ricardo Raquel. So that one makes sense if you're trying to focus on adding some more scoring pop on the wing, if DeBrusk is indeed going to be moved by next Monday. And then, either Manson or Lindholm. I think the Manson would definitely help out within this year, even though you have to, go through the, whether it's eating his contract, because I think he's up to like a $4.1 million cap hit, or like with Lindholm. Lindholm makes plenty of sense within the fact that he's top 4 guy, big body, even though he's not necessarily like a bruiser. He's not like this 6'4", and he's going to be like rocking guys all over the ice, but still 20 plus minutes a night, is able to rack up points. At least he's a guy that you can pencil in top 4 and not have to worry about it. Like if your top 4 is McAvoy, Grzelcyk, Lindholm, Kahlo, you're doing pretty well. It's just whether, it's just the fact that for him, it's the guy that you want to build for the future with. Because again, makes sense, 27, free agent, but I think he wants to go to market. And you look at his numbers, they've kind of been like a little bit on this downhill trend over the last couple of years. Now, he has played a lot this year with Jamie Drysdale, who's a rookie, or if not a rookie, he's like 20. So
he's very young.
Yeah, I don't know if that has maybe hampered Hampus's stats a little bit.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, I mean, that could be the case, or it could be a guy who's just 27, 28 and is starting to decline a little bit, which if that's the case, you don't want to be the guy handing him that checkbook.
Like an Ekman-Larsson type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that risk there. But again, it also I think it kind of comes down to, one, what the cost is, and 2, what else is out there. Because it's like, again, if no one else is available on defense, and it's like, well, we just have to give up to get Hampus Lindholm instead. No one's going to be like punching a hole in the wall. Same with Giroux. Like, oh, well, can't get Hurdle like JT Miller. I guess we have to get Claude Giroux. Like,
guess we'll settle for this.
Yeah, at the very least, like, as much as I think Bruins fans and I think the Bruins want to have this team improve this summer or improve ahead of this postseason, and then have foundations in place for the coming years where you get excited about, all right, we've got, Hurdle here next year, we can run it right back, or we at least can build off of this if Bergeron retires. Don't have that same good tidings if it's maybe a guy like Lindholm who goes to the market, or Giroux, who even if he resigns, it'd be like 2-3 years. Like, it's more of a short-term gain. But if it helps you out this year, which this team's rolling pretty well right now, I don't think, again, you're not going to, either way, it's a win-win. And the only lose-lose situation is if the Bruins either aren't able to get any deals done and they're still a good team, but you're still looking at for a second round, or it's a case where the market is so barren they have to overpay for a guy where it's like, all right, we had to give up, if like you get Lindholm, who's a free agent, and you had to give up one of Lohrei Lysell for it, then you're okay, shit. But yeah, exactly. If you get a first and like a Studnicka and another guy for Hurdle, and then you sign him long term, that's great. And again, as you said with Chychrun, if Chychrun's available and you get him for a first and Lohrei, that's one where you're like, all right, you got to give to get, but you got this guy in place for a couple of years now. So that's the only other lose-lose if they have to throw in really valuable assets for guys that are either a short-term gain or a pending free agent, especially.
It comes down to what the other Atlantic division teams do. Again, Toronto, Tampa, Florida all bolster up, and you kind of do nothing. When you could have done something, that's another huge loss. Like, that's another, arms race, we just lost it. So I will ask you this to end. What do they do? What are your predictions? I think we did this back at the beginning of the second half. I said they would go for JT Miller and Nick Leddy of the Red Wings. That's who I said. I'm not going to stick with that. I think it's going to be very different. But what do you think they're going to do? Because you said Hurdle back in the day, so that might still hold.
I will do, and it's going to be wrong immediately because I know Hurdle's going to sign a contract. I say they get Hurdle and Jacob Middleton.
Fuck! I just wrote this down.
And they get Ricard Raquel for DeBrusk and maybe a pick or something like that.
Oh, so you think they do both? You think they get a package deal?
I'll say this right now, but I'll have to go and get that cap to work because I have to look at that because you have to do a little bit of finagling there. But I think it's just gonna come down to what the market is, what teams are selling. But you've got multiple ways to improve this roster, whether it's just slightly bolstering it with a guy like Middleton or Raquel, who I don't think is going to cost so much as a pending free agent, or a guy like Hurdle. It's all, it's going to just depend on who's out there and what teams are committed to selling. But if you have multiple teams interested in moving assets, the Bruins can make quite a few trades that, even if it's maybe something that's marginal, like Middleton, who we don't really know. He's 25, it's first full year in the NHL, but helps you out, then it works out. So that'll be my pick. I'll do Hurdle, Middleton, and Raquel.
Okay, I was going to say Hurdle and Middleton, but I will add to this as well. I'll go with the Ducks, so I'm going to go a little bit bolder. I'll say Raquel and Manson or Raquel and Lindholm. They'll do one of those two. So the Raquel Lindholm, if you did Raquel and Lindholm, I'm not saying both. I'm saying or. So you're either doing Hurdle and Middleton or Raquel and Lindholm or Raquel and Manson. If you were to do any of those three, I think you're such a better team. And if they did what you just said, then you're a cup contender. Like no doubt. If you got Hurdle down the middle and you got Raquel as well, and you got Middleton on the back end, like I think you are a Stanley Cup contender at that point. It just comes down to Jeremy Swayman holding up a net with Linus Ullmark behind him. So lots of interesting stuff. Again, we'll have a lot of coverage for you as the deadline gets closer. What can the people look forward to over at Boston Sports Journal, Connor, for the deadline?
Yes, obviously with
everyone's
the deadline,
still everyone's still they're what's the word? They are still like basking in the joy that your feature brought on the goaltending hug. So they're kind of they need a good like sequel to that,
Yeah, or like a punch to the gut when I'm like I write something on Friday like, yeah, Hurdle's signed. The Bruins want to get better, but no team is entertaining them because they're all run by idiots who can't embrace rebuild. But no, we will obviously this week with the deadline we'll have reaction to any news that comes out, any contingency plans the Bruins need to make in terms of this deadline, which seems like the market changes every other day. Predictions, all that good stuff. As you said, we had a great feature. It came out about Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark. We should have another one coming out this week on the goalies as well, on a little bit of a different theme. So barring a Hurdle trade on Thursday, it should be something a little bit later in the week as well. All that stuff will be over at bostonsportsjournal.com. So please subscribe to BS Shea. You want to follow me on Twitter for tweets and breaking news and horrible GIFs. You can follow me at Conor Ryan _93.
You could write a story on the goaltending hugs every week for the next 7 weeks, and people would eat it up, as they should. But there will be a lot more over at BSJ. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins beat listeners have a great rest of your week.